Hey, I'm Oliver, and today we're opening a royal case file that refuses to close. A ruler whose face, according to witnesses and artworks, did not seem to age. For decades he appeared unchanged in portraits, on coins, and in diplomats' journals. Was it biology, illusion, or a masterful political strategy that fooled history? Stay with me, because the evidence points to something stranger and smarter than a simple miracle. Here's the unexpected truth. This mystery sits where folklore, medicine, and power overlap. Court chroniclers praised his unchanging countenance. Painters produced images 20 and 30 years apart that look nearly identical. Merchants wrote of meeting a sovereign who looked exactly as he had when their fathers visited. Either the man defied time, or someone carefully controlled what the world was allowed to see, and the clue that cracks it open is hidden where artists had no brush. First, the pictures we trust too much. Palace portraits weren't passport photos, they were policy. Artists were paid to idealize. Wrinkles softened, posture corrected, scars erased. When a kingdom needed stability, painters delivered continuity. And coins? Mints often reused successful dyes for years, so the same youthful profile kept circulating long after the real face should have changed. That alone could freeze a ruler in time for anyone who never stood close to the throne. But travelers swore they did stand near the throne and were startled by his youthfulness. So let's test a second hypothesis: medical outliers. Some people do age slowly. Research on longevity points to rare genetic variants, lower growth factor signaling, and disciplined habits that blunt visible aging. There are conditions with later than usual graying or fewer facial lines. None of this makes someone immortal, but it can stretch the window in which a face stays remarkably similar, especially with cool sleeping rooms, minimal alcohol, early nights, and moderation at the table. You probably haven't heard this before, but advisors in several courts kept light books, noting which chambers admitted the gentlest daylight for audiences. Candles and torchlight flatten features. Noon sun does the opposite. If most appearances were staged by evening glow, a smooth face becomes a policy choice, not a miracle. And when the sovereign rode out by day, distance did the rest. A balcony, a canopy, a veil. So the public saw a symbol more than a skin texture. There's a third possibility that sounds dramatic, until you examine how palaces actually worked. Substitution. Monarchs controlled access with distance and regalia. A trusted double could ride in parades, while the real sovereign reserved close audiences for envoys. Add standardized regnal names and choreography, and you create continuity even if there are changes behind the curtain. Think less science fiction and more theatre, plausible, repeatable, effective. Before we choose an answer, we need data the painter couldn't edit. Tailors' ledgers recorded measurements to invoice the treasury. Over decades, those numbers should expand with middle age. If the measurements stay frozen, we either have a rare outlier or a mannequin standing in for a man. Wardrobe notes list glove sizes, boot wear, and alterations. Stability there can be suspicious. Mint logs track dye use. A sudden return to an older profile after a gap often signals branding, not biography, and court calendars can reveal when public viewings shifted from daylight to torchlit ceremony, the moment where illusion becomes policy. Now for the basement level of the story: remedies and rituals. Our ruler patronized alchemists who promised elixirs of life. Recipes included mercury, gold leaf, and rare herbs. Some mixtures tightened skin briefly, others were dangerous. More practical regimens were surprisingly modern: cold bathing, shaded gardens for exercise, early sleep, and simple food. Combine disciplined living with flattering lighting and selective appearances, and you get a face that seems to pause the clock. But here's why it truly matters. An ageless ruler isn't just a curiosity, it's a weapon of statecraft. A face that never changes suggests a regime that will never end. In crises, the court could release a familiar portrait and steady the market. At negotiations, a diplomat unsettled by the same unlined smile his father saw might concede too much. The illusion of immortality protects taxes, treaties, and thrones. So what actually happened? The most convincing picture blends the strands. Genetics and habits gave him a head start. Image makers amplified it with idealized art, controlled lighting, and coinage that recycled the same profile. And when distance was useful, ceremony and doubles maintained the brand. Does that solve every eyewitness account? Not quite. One diary notes a sudden shift. The sovereign appeared only by torchlight, his voice thinner, his gait clipped. A double during illness, or a successor wearing the same crown and the same carefully managed face? Stay with me, because in part 2 we'll follow the forensics. We'll test paint layers to see if restorers froze a youthful face, link coin dies to timelines, and read tailors' books and private letters that hint at a succession managed in secret. We may not find a single smoking gun, but we can expose a design, a masterclass in how power manipulates time itself. Start with the evidence that can't be flattered by a painter. Infrared reflectography on royal portraits often exposes underdrawings and corrections. If a canvas shows faint sketch lines of creases at the mouth and eyes that were later smoothed with fresh paint, we're not looking at immortality, we're looking at policy. Varnish layers tell time too. A youthful cheek repainted decades later leaves a different chemical fingerprint. When restorers find repeated retouching around the same features, that timeless face starts to look like a workshop schedule. Coins offer another hard trail. Die-link studies can connect one coin to the next like pages in a flipbook. If a mint keeps recutting the same youthful profile while changing only the legend and symbols, that's branding. It's the royal equivalent of a corporate logo, stable, reassuring, and deliberately age-proof. And when a new, older die appears briefly, and then the mint snaps back to the youthful version, you're seeing market testing in precious metal. Textiles whisper too. Tailors' ledgers are brutal in their honesty because fabric costs money. Waistbands let out, collars widened, glove sizes adjusted. These are numbers that don't lie. If the record stays oddly flat while the reign grows long, we have either a biological outlier or a court that rotated public garments among doubles. Shoemakers' notes sometimes list 2 pairs with identical markings prepared for the same ceremony. Why 2? One explanation is prudence. Another is a stand-in ready to ride. But biology still matters. Slow-aging phenotypes exist. Lower body fat, consistent outdoor movement, and cooler sleeping quarters reduce inflammation and keep skin firm. Some herbal astringents tighten pores for a few hours. Egg white, alum, resinous gums. Simple preparations any apothecary could mix before a state audience. Add light strategy, evening receptions, high candles, and a canopy that throws soft shadows across the brow. Combine those choices, and a midlife face can read as decisively younger in person than it would in plain noon sun. You probably haven't heard this before, but voice can be managed too. Court physicians advised rulers to speak in shorter phrases, lowering pitch and conserving breath. A measured cadence projects vigor even when stamina dips. Pair that with choreography, short distances, resting chairs hidden behind tapestries, discreet handoffs of the scepter, and age retreats behind ceremony. It isn't sorcery, it's theatre performed with the instruments of state. Then there's succession. When regnal names repeat across generations, an heir groomed to echo a predecessor's gestures can blur the line between individuals. A subtle shift in signet design, a left-handed flourish becoming right-handed, a favourite ring worn on a different finger. These tiny slips sometimes appear in letters and sketches from foreign envoys. Were they witnessing the same man extending his rule with artful maintenance, or a carefully staged continuity with a new sovereign wearing a familiar face? Let's test the occult thread without sensationalism. Secret rites in subterranean rooms sound cinematic, but much of their power was psychological. Ritual provides narrative. A king appears blessed beyond time because he is framed as such repeatedly under vaults where sound softens and candlelight sanctifies. The effect radiates upward. Courtiers leave convinced, and conviction is contagious. Whether or not the rite worked biologically, it worked politically. Confidence in the body became confidence in the body politic. And yet, a few clues hint at genuine health advantages. Diets heavy in fish and legumes, wine cut with water, long walks in shaded gardens, winter bedchambers kept cool. These habits lengthen the period before midlife features deepen. Add cosmetic powders that mattify shine and reduce shadow contrast, and you've built a low-tech, high-impact longevity effect visible from 10 paces, not immortal, just well-managed. So where does the trail point? To a blend more sophisticated than a miracle. Art established the template, the mint amplified it, ceremony protected it, health and habit prolonged it, and when needed, performance doubled it. A ruler who never aged wasn't cheating time so much as choreographing how time was seen. That's the lesson hiding in the margins of ledgers and the layers of paint. Here's why it truly matters today. Recognizing the machinery behind a timeless public image trains us to read power with sharper eyes. When you pass a portrait in a museum, look for repeats, the same cheek curve resurfacing across decades. When you hold a reproduction coin, ask whether the legend changed while the face did not. If you visit a palace archive, seek the tailor's numbers and the shoemaker's notes. They often tell the story the court preferred to mute. One last lead remains. In the correspondence of a trusted chamberlain, there's a note about the evening light that forgives. Another letter mentions the double prepared for the ride. Neither proves a conspiracy outright, but together they outline a system, one that fused medicine, image-making and ritual into a single message. This face endures. Therefore, this rule endures. Perhaps the sovereign didn't defeat aging. Perhaps he mastered attention. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If time can be staged so convincingly that it looks like a miracle, what other certainties in the historical record are really performances we've mistaken for truth?